Hi, welcome to Dan Mitchell Fitness and our guide to fat. So, fat is quite an important part of our diet, and it can be quite a confusing thing to kind of understand. And we're just going to briefly kind of go through why fat is important in the diet, why you need a certain amount of it, what low fat diets do to the body, etc. So we're going to kind of just quickly go through things in terms of fat. So fat was kind of demonized in the 80s within the diet, so a lot of people went on low fat diets, and this could actually be quite detrimental for a number of different reasons to people's overall health. But let's start at the beginning and just talk about dietary fat and why eating fat doesn't actually make you gain fat. So fat's a macronutrient. It's the same type of nutrient as a protein and carbohydrate. Your body utilizes them in very different ways. It's probably the second most important macronutrient in your diet other than protein. So when a nutrition coach such as ourselves will put together a dietary plan, we will look at fat second after protein, as it has a very important role to play in health, and so a minimum amount has to be considered for each individual. Now, fat has 9 calories for every single gram of the macronutrient itself. So it is actually the most calorically dense, so the highest amount of calories per gram of food comes from fat, so it's 9 calories per gram. So when it comes to dieting, whilst fat shouldn't be eliminated, it's certainly something to monitor purely on the basis that if you have a higher fat food in your diet, then it can potentially, something we can look at to change so that we can bring your overall calorie intake down. But again, it must be to a certain minimum point before we drop it too low. So there's a lot of talk in the media around about healthy fats. The role of healthy fats is often overstated in the industry. Certainly in the past couple of days, as this was recorded, I believe it was the Daily Telegraph in the UK came out with an article saying that you don't need to watch your calories, you just need to eat a good amount of good fats in your diet, which is completely false, and that's actually incorrect. Now, calories are the most important part of a diet in terms of overall caloric intake is the most important part to be concerned of. Yes, you do need fats in your diet, and a good balance of the different types of fats in your diet is a sensible way to go. So restricting fats is probably not that sensible, and that's certainly how we do things here at DMF. So making sure that your overall diet is balanced and within your calorie requirement is of more importance than the types of fat you eat. That said, eating high amounts of trans fats, etc., is probably not a wise choice. So again, it comes with a little bit of a warning and say, yes, you can consume different types of fats, but just try to monitor it a little bit. Health. So fat is actually a precursor to hormone production. So poor fat intake can actually cause problems, especially for females in terms of hormonal production and reproductive function. There's a lot more to be said for like calorie intake rather than fat, but fat is certainly something to consider. So going low fat could be quite detrimental to reproductive health, amongst other things. So moving on, so fat in terms of dieting can actually be quite a useful tool. There's a mechanism when eating fat within the GI tract that once you consume a fatty food, it actually slows gastric emptying. So basically what that means is it actually slows the speed at which food is emptied from your stomach into the intestine. That's a good thing because you obviously stay full for longer. Now, due to the makeup of fatty foods, they actually do feel quite good to eat, so they feel quite good in the mouth, and a lot of people will wonder what that means, but generally speaking, you'll get a lot more enjoyment out of eating fattier foods, and they taste pretty good too. So it's it's something to consider when trying to look at an overall diet, but certainly from a calorie restricted diet, it's something to consider. So some essential vitamins are only absorbed through consumption of fat, so they are that's fat soluble. So A, D, E, and K are the sort of vitamins to be sort of noted here. It's a pretty important thing to consider. We definitely do not want any micronutrient deficiency from a health perspective, so really we have no real choice. We must ensure that we get our fats in, unless of course we've had some issues with our gallbladder, etc. Where can you find these fats? So fats are found in oils, so things like olive oil, rapeseed oil, etc., etc. Nut butters, things like peanut butter, almond butter, etc. Normal butter, so just dairy butter, different types of fish, seeds, eggs, avocados, cheese. These are just some of the sources. There are other sources. So in terms of other fats, some pretty essential essential fatty acids to consider, which aren't on this list, are omega-3 EFA. So that's something which we find pretty hard to synthesize in our body, so it's something which we need to get from our diet. So supplementation can work quite well here, and we'll go into that in depth a little more in the supplements area. So that kind of sums up fats, and hopefully it gives you a better understanding as to why fats are necessary in the diet and why we shouldn't be frightened of them, why there's a certain recommendation, a minimum recommendation based on the latest evidence that will help you understand and include them in your diet rather than be frightened of them. So that concludes the video on fat. We hope that kind of makes sense to you. Please let us know if you have any questions.